Hello and welcome to this first episode in our new video series of interviews called TEL Potager. Just to explain that potager is a French term for a modest kitchen garden, or in some rural areas it refers to a warming oven. So, we're using it in this series of conversations as a metaphor, of course, for discussing our centre members' interests. Technology enhanced learning is a much more problematic notion to define. I'm not even going to try, I'm not brave enough. But that's the joy of our centre's activities, isn't it? And something we'll discuss as we go along in this series. What we're doing here is TEL Potager is a series of interviews with our centre members. It's an initiative to explore some different aspects of TEL research with different people. It's very basic and stripped back. It's a talking heads format. There's no need whatsoever for a production budget. We're just having a conversation with a purpose, really. And we learn a little bit more about centre colleagues outside of work projects, outside of those, time compressed centre meetings and focused discussions of research, as enjoyable as those things always are. Our guest today is a highlight for me personally. I'm sure anyone else who's worked and learned with her will think so too. In this episode of our series, we're lucky enough to be joined by Julia Gillen. Hello, Julia. Thanks for joining
Hello.
me.
Hi, Phil. I'm very pleased to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Julia is certainly known for being utterly credible, a seminal voice in her research field and on the bazaars of the university more generally and elsewhere, picking up lots of different projects for the greater good, incredibly supportive. Julia does a lot of what we might call in modern parlance paying it forward, I think, and certainly does a lot to help those of us who aren't so established. At Lancaster University, Julia is a professor of Literacy Studies in the Department of Linguistics and English Language, Associate Dean of Engagement in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, formerly a Director of the Lancaster Literacy Research Centre, a champion of sustainability, along with plenty of other things, wider work and learning projects I was interested to read include intergenerational research, Edwardian postcards, which are fascinating, early childhood studies, mixed reality, and much more. I don't think I can do you justice, Julia, on a call like this. It's all genuinely fascinating and certainly a healthily diverse set of interests too. I wonder if you wouldn't mind if we got going by just asking you a bit about your background in digital literacies, how you became interested in TEL. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine, Phil. Yes. Well, I think all the way back to when I was 16, actually. I left school at 16 and I had some shorthand and typing knowledge. So I got a job as a secretary in an advertising agency and started learning how to started with the shorthand and typing, but there was a thing called word processors just coming in,
Mm.
which I suppose were a forerunner of computers. So I started to learn so I learned how to operate word processors. And that came in very handy then when I studied a couple of A levels in a year and then went to university to study because I could temp as a secretary with the benefit of having this skill in word processing, which was paid more highly than shorthand and typing. So it was very
All
useful.
right.
A friend of mine also, she learnt how to use telex machines, which I knew to some extent. I seem to recall that you typed into a machine and white tape with holes in, came out the other end and your end as well. And she actually got so expert that she could read partly using her fingers as well as her eyes, these holes, and kind of reconstruct a message or where something had gone wrong and so forth. So I guess both of those experiences and then later use of early computers in the travel industry just got me very interested in how kind of advancing technologies can be useful in society to promote learning or to promote things working better or in new and different ways.
That's fascinating to me. I mean, I'd see shorthand as such an esoteric and magical skill that I'd be willing to pay much more of a premium than operating a word. Isn't it fascinating looking back now on, what
Yes.
was regarded as, that attracting a higher wage? I mean, in terms of how that led into technology enhanced learning, I suppose, and even what technology enhanced learning is
Mm.
and what it does, and how it has consequences in perhaps particularly in research in digital literacies. Do you have any particular projects that are planned or ongoing that you can maybe discuss with us? Is there any research
Yes.
related that you can share?
Yes, I'd love to mention two projects, but before I do, I'll just go back to your earlier questioning about whether shorthand, which was more difficult, frankly, to learn and to use than a word processor, um, why it was lower paid. And of course, the answer, as so often, is gender related.
Oh,
Shorthand
right.
typing was associated with female secretaries. Word processors were, from the moment of their inception, more associated with men, and so men and women learnt to use them. But I suspect, and also, of course, the actual machine itself was more expensive than a notepad and a typewriter. So therefore, you've got the the higher pay that went along with the word processing. I think I can remember, that when I was at university, I could earn £5 an hour, doing temporary word processing. So that was very good. Anyway, so what am I doing now? Yes, so it's a lots of things in between, obviously. But what I'm doing now is two funded projects, and one is on very young children and digital media in the home. So we're looking in a project led by Rosie Lewis at Manchester Metropolitan University and involving several universities in the UK. We're looking at how very young children under 3 are accessing digital media in the home, and what attitudes their parents have towards it, what people are doing, what they own, and so forth. So that I'm really enjoying that project. And then my other ongoing project is called Research Mobilities in Primary Literacy Education. And that's looking at how research around literacy, reading and writing, to do with children at the primary age, aged around 5 to 11, how that circulates in society, whether teachers can access it, how it's directed at them, how it's mediated, what then teachers choose to access when they do. And it's taking a socio-material perspective. So one of the things we've been looking at, for example, is how research in primary literacy moves using Twitter, for example.
Oh, wow. Isn't that fascinating? So, um, I mean, with all of that work that you've done in digital literacies and everything else, including your work in engagements, long-standing relationship with the Centre for Technology
Mm.
Enhanced Learning, and clearly you're well regarded and connected. I'm not being a sycophant. It's just a statement of fact, particularly when it comes to digital media and very young people. With all of that work, is there anything that you think, um, in terms of if you had your own TEL Potager? I know this is going to be a really abstract question, but I'm fascinated to hear. If you had your very own TEL Potager, so this separate kitchen garden or warming oven for technology enhanced learning, so let's say you could privately grow or nurture or incubate anything related to TEL. Have you got any ideas about what that might be?
I definitely am so interested in both the current projects that there are different ways in which they could be extended. So, for example, with relation to the projects I've just been talking about, the research mobilities in primary literacy education, then Kathy Burnett of Sheffield Hallam University, who's leading the project overall, has also led the elements of working with teachers in interviews, focus groups, and so forth,
Mm.
and has found that the what teachers are supposed to engage with in both initial teacher training and CPD is very narrowly restricted. So I would like to see more opportunities made possible for teachers and more resources to access and explore in more creative fashions as well, research and ideas and practices around technology enhanced learning, so as to um, enhance their professionalism and sense of agency, and also to enrich the types and kinds and depths of research that are made available to teachers at present. So I think that that in a better world, then technology enhanced learning could really help with that enriching that environment, both in the UK and in some places overseas. We're having increasing conversations with academics Canada, USA, and other places who are talking about the same issues, and how teachers' access to knowledge about reading and writing and creative practices is being really restricted.
Yeah, there was that awful time. I don't know if it happened in the world of digital literacies, but there was an awful time in my background, which is STEM, in a lot of STEM education research, where teachers were becoming decentered almost, and you thought this isn't right. These people aren't just gatekeepers. They're not just convenient stakeholders. They're absolutely fundamental to everything that goes on, and I suppose that's magnified with younger people, isn't it? Where they really are critical to everything that happens.
Yes, I think it's true at all stages of education that teachers should be encouraged to be professional and to think for themselves and so forth. And it's what's most horrifying to me is when people talk about things like teacher-proof interventions. It's just a misunderstanding, I think, the potential of education.
To my shame, I immediately make almost a normative judgment of the person who just said that thing. I think, do you really truly understand, what education is and what it's for? I know it's open to negotiation, but I just can't help making that judgment about how naive it kind of sounds, I suppose. Um, I mean, with all of the work that you've done in digital literacies and everything else, is there anything that you think we're not discussing enough? I suppose it's a kind of segue from the previous question, really. Is there anything that we're not discussing enough with regard to technology enhanced learning, either in HE or education more broadly, or society at large, or as this global community of scholars and researchers?
Oh, I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm probably thinking too much about my own projects. So I just immediately bunched to thinking about some of the simplistic judgments that are made around areas of very young children's encounter with digital media.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting picture that we're uncovering, really. Find parents extremely thoughtful about their children's encounters with digital media, but there's a sense in which they're faced with what Lisa Kervin has called tensions and contradictions in societal arguments. Because on the one hand, you've got the argument that children should be school ready.
Mm.
At the age of 4, they should know their colours. They should know various things about looking after themselves, but they should be sort of ready to start to learn to read and write and so forth. And some of these things can well be enhanced by interactions with technology. There's lots of really fascinating and useful material on children's YouTube, for example, or CBeebies in television. On the other hand, we see, of course, the discourse in society that discourages parents from using screens,
Mm.
and sort of condemnatory stories. I actually was given to review a research article by people who had surreptitiously observed parents, children, and screens in a shopping centre. And the researchers had come out with very condemnatory attitudes that the parents and carers were handing over their mobile phones to keep the children quiet, and this sort of discourse. I was obviously able to uh, prevent, frankly, the publication of that article because it was completely unethical and
Mm.
hadn't gone through any ethical body, or and was just generally totally unethical kind of research. But it did highlight for me the difficult world that parents are currently navigating. When our homes have things like that are often disregarded, like perhaps digital displays on washing machines, um, families interacting with smart speakers and so forth. So it's not all just screens. And then
Yeah.
children go into this highly porous world, as it were, quite likely have some really marvelous opportunities to interact with people from digital media. I just this morning actually watched a video of a 2-year-old talking to their grandmother who lives abroad about the porridge. Very, if you like, a mundane interaction, because she's saying, "Is it tasty?" And the child is actually already um, speaking in 2 languages and mixes them in interesting ways. He wanted to demonstrate that he knew the word porridge and so forth.
Yeah.
And so that his life is being enriched through having discussions with his grandmother, who he can't, see face to face every day. So as I say, parents and carers are navigating a really complex world.
They certainly are, aren't they? I think some of that as well is dependent on people's conceptions of technology and what the technology is, So um, some of the Vincent Moss, something we've spoken about before. Vincent Mosco uses this term powerful banality to denote the things that we barely notice until they've gone wrong, like, a pen, a chalkboard, a chair. They're all technologies and they're very powerful. Coordinated time probably being the most impactful. And I was thinking about that when you were talking there, that the presumably that interaction became more about the porridge and, as you described it, this mundane conversation than it did about getting the screen to work and all that, which
Yes.
is kind of to be celebrated, isn't it? That they could get on with, a social interaction. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. Yes, because what had happened was the mother, so she presumably regularly did this, so because it was completely unremarkable to the child, had propped up her phone on the surface, and the child was standing there eating the porridge and looking at the grandparents and just having a chat, while the mother was, in the background. So yes, as you say, it had become almost transparent, as it were, from the experience of the child.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Um, I mean, believe it or not, the time has absolutely flown by for me. We've only got a few minutes remaining, and I'd like to just get something else from you while we've got a monopoly on your attention. You were saying there about focusing on your own research. I think that's incredibly fascinating. So I hope you'll focus on it with this next question. I'm going to ask you something. It could be related to digital literacies or something else entirely, I suppose. If you had no practical constraints of, money, time, distance, expertise, if everything was unlimited, what would you like to see with regard to technology enhanced learning? If we could make a wish, wave a magic wand, if you could clap your hands and see a change, what would you roll out tomorrow, Julia?
Collaborative collaborations, really, more participatory research, less of the sense of interventions with always with research questions and clear aims. And I'd like to see more, and I know it does sound idealistic, but I would like to see more collaborative conversations, for example, involving, say, primary school teachers in different countries and
Mm,
researchers, just suitably resourced opportunities for interested people to get together in more exploratory ways, and including to explore um, critical approaches to literacy, creative approaches, and so forth, both face to face and online and hybrid.
that sounds fascinating. I look forward to the day when we can accomplish that. And, we shouldn't stop trying, should we,
No,
until we've got there. That's brilliant. It's been a real joy for me, Julia. Thanks for giving up your time and capacity. And particularly for kicking off the first of the series. I hope they'll all be so enjoyable. It was absolutely brilliant. So we got to know a little bit more about you and your TEL Potager, some bonus knowledge about TEL relating to digital literacies and shorthand and uh, that.
can I say something before I go though, Phil?
Yes,
I do want to
absolutely.
say I am in favour, because I'm just thinking of who might watch it and what they might think. I am in favour of focused investigations with clear aims and research questions as well. It's
Yeah,
just
sure.
that I think the broad environment of research allows for different sorts of approaches, and that's what I hope to see. And I think genuinely what I do see to some extent in the Centre for Technology Enhanced Learning, over the years I've been to meetings, heard your colleagues, heard your students talk about many different approaches, and I think this is and also benefit from the international community that the Centre for Technology Enhanced Learning offers. So long may that continue.
Yeah, here. I think, yeah, I don't think your um, your kind of aspirational stuff there. I don't think it jeopardized that. I think it'd probably strengthen that, wouldn't it?
Yes.
It would certainly underpin it in a great way. Now, I know you're going to be cross with me for this next bit, and I promise it's not contrived. I know you're very modest, but I have to recommend Julia's book, Digital Literacies. I absolutely have to. That's not contrived. I've actually got it out because I was talking to somebody a few days ago who I'm supervising and is doing um, a bit of research where they've, I'm going to say, stumbled into digital literacies and then realized how it helps to expose quite a bit of what's going on. So I'd even recommend, if you are a researcher in TEL, you at least just have a cursory read about digital literacies to see what it is. I think it was inspired in the book itself to examine digital literacies from a sort of linguistic ethnography and socio-cultural perspective. It fascinated me. It's also accessible and entirely readable, which not all books at that level are. It's capacity building, which I think is grand, and I thank you for that. I learned a huge amount from cave art to a little bit more about activity theory, online forum curation, questioning what we think education is for. And I found some shared discomfort in some of the theories that are thrown around without sufficient connection to daily reality and education, I think. But that's a different conversation. It'll have to wait. You've already been very generous with your time. Please do remember, everyone, let us know if you've got any particular questions or ideas or suggestions for the TEL Potager interview series, including if you'd like to be interviewed for it. Drop us a line if there's something interesting growing or warming up nicely in your TEL Potager. And don't forget to subscribe to the CTEL channel, which is on the top right corner if you're watching on YouTube. We'll see you all next time on TEL Potager. Thanks again, Julia. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank
Cheerio.
you. Bye.